All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Carl Anderson. I am with Comprehensive Mental Health, and I am part of Metro Council. For those who don't know, Metro Council is the group of community behavioral health centers that serve Greater Kansas City, so on the Missouri and the Kansas side. We do these free webinars twice a month on the second and fourth Thursday of the month. And they're always from noon to 1. So please keep an eye on the website as those things go up so that you know if there's something that you want to go to, it's here for you. We also do the annual Mental Health KC Conference. This year, that's May 29th and 30th. And towards the end, I'll throw a link in to the registration link for that. Also, just so you know, there is a certificate of attendance that you can download for today. And I will put the link and the password for that up to when we get to about probably the 10-minute mark or so towards the end. In the meantime, and I'm going to forgive my reading, but I am going to welcome Matt Burton, our presenter today on DBT for All. Matt is an LCSW that's been working in mental health for over a decade. His compassion for people with mental health struggles was developed from wanting to help others to live a better life. After seeing friends and family deal with mental health struggles, as well as his own struggle with anxiety and depression, Matt decided to get a degree in social work. He received his Bachelor's of Social Work from Park University and his Master's from UMKC. Within his time in the field, Matt has directed 2 adult day programs, ran IOP groups, did integrated assessments, and is now working full-time at Beacon Mental Health as a behavioral health therapist. And so with that, I will welcome in Matt Burton.
All right. Thank you, Carl. Thank you and the Metro Council for having me. Really enjoy speaking with you all. And thanks everybody for joining and spending your lunch with me. And with that, I will share my slides and we will get going. Okay, so what I wanted to do today is present the DBT skills to you all. And we're going to do that by making it as easy and as simple as possible. So with that, we will move on. So when we're thinking about dialectics, the D in DBT, what does that mean? So according to the creator of DBT, Marsha Linehan, dialectical refers to the synthesis or integration of seamlessly opposing ideas or concepts, emphasizing the value of finding a balance between acceptance and change. So many of us in our personal lives or in our practice, work with people that, we refer to having a black or white thinking. And with the dialectics, it really allows them to kind of break that black and white thinking down and to say, it's okay. I can improve myself while accepting me as who I am. I can try to be my best and still want to be better. I can disagree with you and we can still be friends. So, from a mental health perspective, allowing that person the freedom to, say, yeah, things aren't great right now. You're not really being the nicest to yourself, but you're working on that is, for me and for the practice and the people I work with, it's just a sense of freedom and acceptance. And so that's one of the key elements to the DBT. So one of the things about DBT skills when I first started DBT is that there are so many of them. Quite frankly, it is overwhelming and it kind of makes you, say, well, that just seems like, something for those therapists. I'm going to stick with, what I do, what I know. So, part of the goal today is to break some of that stigma down and say, you know what, we can take small chunks of this and we can still use these skills effectively. So they're useful for therapeutic settings, beneficial for both clients and yourself. You do not need to be a certified DBT therapist to use skills. So these skills can be treated, can be used in your treatment. Now, the key is that only certified therapists can claim DBT as their modality. So you can't say you're a DBT therapist and just teach skills. You wouldn't be able to claim that. You would just say, I teach talk therapy or whatever, and I implement or use some parts from DBT skills. For those who don't know, to be a fully certified DBT therapist, the therapist has to meet with the client once a week. That meeting is very structured. It includes diary cards, which we will go over. It also includes a mindfulness practice as a part of every session. And then that client is also required to join a 2 hour a week DBT class. So they're doing an hour individual, 2 hours of group. So the therapist would do the group as well. And then another big part is that the DBT therapists are open to coaching calls. And these are 5 to 15 minute calls where where the client can call the therapist and kind of brainstorm how to use a skill in their current situation. So that's what makes the difference of teaching the skills and fully doing DBT therapy. Okay, so we like to think of the DBT, we break it down into 4 categories or 4 pillars, and we start with mindfulness. Mindfulness in DBT is about cultivating present moment awareness, acceptance, and non-judgmental stance in managing thoughts and emotions. We focus a lot on the non-judgmental part. Second, we move the client through distress tolerance. This is where we develop crisis survival skills to cope with intense emotions and urges in an effective way. So, a lot of the people that are in DBT are self-harming. And so, how can we get through this crisis more effectively while still tolerating our intense emotions? Emotional regulation is where we learn techniques to understand, name, and effectively manage difficult emotions. And then we move on to interpersonal effectiveness, where we build communication and relationship skills to assess needs, set boundaries, and maintain healthy connections with others. So the way that I like to think of these sections is that we need to know how our mind works first. We have to get in our mind. Sometimes our clients are disassociating. Sometimes they're so much in flight mode that they don't practice mindfulness. So first we have to understand that we have a mind, it's there, and that we need to pay attention to it. And then we can learn to tolerate our emotions and kind of push our boundaries and our distress while managing maladaptive coping mechanisms or negative coping skills. And once we have distressing emotions without negative coping skills, we can learn to regulate those emotions. So we're going from just being able to tolerate intense emotions to being able to control those emotions more effectively. So perhaps they're not getting as intense.
Hey,
And
Matt.
then lastly, we need to take our new skills and insights into the world. This is where interpersonal effectiveness comes into play. And we need to be effective at communicating, our newfound understanding of ourselves. And maybe we tolerated negative relationships, family members that overstep boundaries. Well, now that we're, managing effectively, now we need to take that step to communicate that to our friends and family and to the world. So I think DBT does well to set that up strategically.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
I just got a note where the people are seeing your like your notes and everything, not just the full slides. Is there a full screen button that you can?
Okay, let's see here. Stop sharing. Let's see, share. Okay. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, guys. I need notes. Appreciate the feedback. Thank you all. And this should be easier because I did want to put some images on the screen. If you all want this slideshow, I'd be glad to share it with you. You can email me. Um, so I wanted to pack this with as much information as possible. So this is a standard diary card, and the clients are expected to do these diary cards and to bring them with them to every session. We're looking at them rating their emotions, them rating any suicidal ideation or behaviors. We're watching their energy levels, their eating, their exercise, their sleep, and then we're listing the skills that they're using for some of those stressors as they come. And then on the back side, I think it's really good because most of the people I work with are having bad days and high numbers of depression, anxiety. Is that we ask them to think of positive experiences for each day and things that they are also grateful for. Um, a lot of the clients, struggle with doing these diary cards. Some DBT therapists are, more strict where they won't see the person till they finish them, even if they're doing them in the lobby. Some therapists would allow them to do them together. It just kind of depends, but regardless, this is a major part of the DBT. And just to go back a little, one thing I forgot to mention for the fully certified DBT is that myself as a therapist, I do an hours and a half worth of weekly consultation with other DBT therapists, where we're encouraged to use our skills and to practice. We practice mindfulness in every group as well. And so a big part of the DBT is that the therapists are doing the skills and the diary cards and checking in with other therapists that are practicing. And so I feel really good looking at my clients and saying, I struggle with the diary cards too. I don't feel like doing them every night. I get it, but it's important for me because I can sit down and see how your week went in 5 minutes instead of you having to try to remember it or me pulling it out of you. It's a great tool and resource. Another tool and resource that we use is the behavioral chain analysis. So this is something, and the diary cards and the chain analysis don't fit perfectly in any of those 4 pillars that we were talking about, but I did want to add this information for you all. So with the behavioral chain analysis, typically we have, someone who may be self-harmed or had, a panic attack or a really bad interaction with a family member. And we can sit down and take that whole situation, which they'll tell you, happened in their head in 30 seconds and they had all emotions under the sun, in an afternoon. We can take that apart and use this behavioral chain analysis to look at it. So, a lot of the things that we're looking at are vulnerabilities. Are you sleeping? Are you eating? Are you taking your meds? Right? What are some of those self-talk are you saying? We're trying to practice mindfulness. Non-judgment is your self-talk saying you're stupid, you're worthless, you're terrible, no one loves you. Well, those are all judgments. And so, let's work on that. And then the target behavior, we can, look at the negative behavior that happened, or we can say, hey, what would the behavior look like if we use this skill? And, what would your thoughts and underlying emotions be then? So it's both a good tool for when they're really unregulated, or if you're trying to help them understand, how to put pieces together to be more regulated. This next slide here is just the second page of the questionnaire. Um, Once again, just so you all have that information. Okay, so getting into the first pillar, first category, we're talking about mindfulness. So in DBT, we break mindfulness up into what to do and how to do it. So what it is a wise mind. And wise mind is a balance between emotional mind and a logical mind. And so I'm sure we've all experience people that are, struggle to only be in their emotions, or maybe, you're working with people that are so stoic that the logical mind rules, and that if things don't perfectly logically work out, then the day is ruined, or what's the point? And so that wise mind is about finding that balance. So what else are we going to do? We're going to observe. So we're going just noticing the present moment without judgment. We're going to describe, putting words to your experiences, emotions, and sensations. I notice that my heart is slightly increased when I'm talking to over 100 people online, right? I'm just describing that. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just what it is. And so I observe that, I notice it, and I'm describing it. And then I'm participating. I'm fully engaging in the current activity, regardless of any current emotions that I am having. So that those are the what skills. At the end of this slide, I have shared some really good 3-minute videos that describe these skills. If we have time, we can review those. Otherwise, you'll have them on the PowerPoint to review later. Okay, so now that we know what mindfulness is, how in the world are we going to do this? So, like I said, the key is a non-judgmental stance. So, approach experiences with an open, curious, and accepting attitude without making evaluations or judgments, which, quite frankly, in our culture where we judge ourselves all the time, we judge what we're wearing, whose car, keeping up with the Joneses, we are basically programmed to judge situations constantly. And so it is extremely difficult to practice a non-judgmental stance. Um, but it is certainly a major part of mindfulness. And one of the ways that we would maybe do this in group is we would literally call people out and say, like, hey, that's a judgment. When I meet for my consultation group with the other therapist, we ring a bell. We don't say anything, we don't analyze it, but when a judgment is made, the bell is rung, and the group continues like nothing happened. But we're acknowledging that those judgments are happening. Um, we want to be one mindfully. So we want to engage fully in the present moment, focusing our intention on one thing at a time. Once again, that is very difficult. We have anywhere from 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts a day. So you trying to pick a moment to focus on just what's going on out of those sea of thoughts is also can be challenging. Our mindfulness exercise yesterday was to talk to our partner for 5 minutes about pineapple on pizza without judgment, and to stay on topic for 5 minutes. So that was a mindfulness activity that we did. How can we talk about what some people consider controversial topic and stay non-judgmental? And how can we stay talking about pizza and pineapple for 5 minutes? So it was a great exercise. One of the gals said, I got a maintenance guy in my house right now, and he didn't lock my door last time, and I can't stop thinking about that. So that one mindfully is bringing you back to that pizza story in that moment, because that is what's happening, regardless of, other things that might be going on in your life that are out of your control at that time. And of course, we want to be as effective as possible. So we practice mindfulness and other DBT skills that are most useful and beneficial in the current situation. So once again, we're not trying to judge. So I should do this, I shouldn't do that. Those are judgments. So we're not saying what you did is right or what you did is wrong, but what we're saying is how effective was that for you in managing your emotions when you punched a hole in the wall? Well, not very effective, right? Because now you're out, money and you got to fix it. And, I'm not saying, anything negative towards you, but it just wasn't effective. So I really like this idea of moving beyond what I should or shouldn't have done to really what is effective. Okay, so those were our mindfulness skills. Now we're going to move on to the next three pillars. Like I said earlier, there are so many skills. So for this presentation, I wanted to put the skills out there for you to have and for us to briefly touch on. But for each of the following categories, I'm going to focus on one or two core skills that I have noticed me going back to constantly with myself for my own use and for my practice. So, distress tolerance. Once again, we're trying to survive a stressful moment without making it worse. So stop skill, pretty self-explanatory. Getting in an argument, it's heated, starting to do some road rage. Stop, remove yourself from the situation, observe what's happening, with wise mind, and proceed, with that mindfully. Pros, cons. Once again, with DBT, what I like about their pros cons is that we do pros and cons for both behaviors. So, what are the pros and cons of you going and getting blackout drunk after an argument with your partner? What are those pros and cons? And what are the pros and cons of you not doing that? And so once again, we're taking out some of that judgment, but allowing them to see, well, it's not very effective when you do this because there are more cons than there are pros. And also you're not shaming them into doing anything either. So it's kind of a little bit more of an open approach, which could make some people defensive. The tip skill is a great skill if you're kind of in like almost panic attack or like fright flight. And so you're literally temperature. You're literally going to put your head in a bowl of ice water. You're going to jump in a cold shower. You're going to go out in the snow without shoes. What's happening here is that you're shutting off that fright flight and, putting a shock in your system for the system to say, okay, whatever I was worried about, my feet freezing is now more important and I'm no longer as panicky. So part of that tip skill is also intense breathing. Or intense exercise rather, and pace breathing or a muscle relaxation technique. So these are things you can do pretty easily. I had a client who was having road rage and put her hand in her Sonic cup right as she was driving to use the tip skill. And I said, well, was that effective? And did it help? And, other than losing her Coke, it prevented her from flipping someone off. So I considered that a win. Okay, so a few other distress tolerance skills. Improve if you haven't noticed already, pretty much all of these DBT skills are acronyms, which just adds to the complexity and like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to remember any of these. Um, but you'll get there. So improve the moment. This is a great one. People, are praying, they're putting a mental image, to go into kind of a safe place. They're trying to do one thing at a time, by being mindful. Um, so that's improved the moment. Self-soothe. A lot of the people I work with pet their animals, pet their cats, those types of things. Not that cats aren't animals, but a lot of cats are petted. And so, also you could use kind of a grounding technique where maybe you use your five senses to focus on the clouds, focus on the trees, maybe focus on your textiles. If you got chocolate in your desk, that's always a great self-soothing strategy that uses one of your senses. Okay, so uh these are distract type skills, but the acronym is accepts. So once again, we're trying to accept the situation while distracting from it. A lot of the clients I know use this. They might talk to someone else and try to engage and put their mind in that person, and so their mind's off of themselves. Activities, a lot of the people I work with chronic depression, um, they say, I'm depressed every day, I'm depressed every week. And I said, well, what did you do this week? And they said, well, I slept, 12 plus hours a day, and I don't have a job. I don't, have a games to play, and I'm like, well, you need activities, right? And to take your mind off of the fact that you're just sleeping and doing nothing all the time, that would be depressing. So these are skills that we can use to kind of help distract ourselves when we're struggling. Okay. So this is my focus skill for distress tolerance, radical acceptance. Acknowledge reality as it is, observe things as they are, and let go of saying things should be different. Now, this does not mean we like or agree with what is happening to us, but we're acknowledging that this situation happened and this situation needs to effectively be managed. So the key there with my clients is this does not mean that you love the situation, that does not mean you want to change it or keep it forever or that you like it, but it happened and you have to accept it or not. So what does that look like? So there's four parts to radical acceptance. We can try to change the situation. We can try to change the way we view the situation. So some cognitive behavioral therapy there. We can accept the situation, or we can continue to suffer. And I get just a little bit of an enjoyment reading that last one. They're like, why would you even say that? Why would that be an option? And I'm like, well, what are you doing now? And they're like, oh, I'm suffering. I'm like, okay, well, let's try to pick one of these other three and not continue to suffer. Um, so, think about being in a fender bender, right? You did not cause this accident. Everybody's safe, everybody's fine, but it's annoying. There's going to be an emotional reaction. But the truth is, the faster you can accept the situation, the faster you can react and manage it. You can get out of the road, you can get the person's information and move on with the situation. Say, that you were driving the Cadillac that your late father gave you, and you get in a total hit and run accident. Obviously, emotionally, this is going to be a lot harder, but it still happened. And, we can be emotional and maybe cuss or cry in that moment. Or we can say, okay, this happened, I need to get to safety. I need to collect witnesses. I need to get as many phone numbers. I need to call the police. And so, I just think of it as this is time that would have been wasted in us not trying to problem solve or resolve the issue. Now, later, once you get home, sure, please cry, grief, that's okay. But in that moment, you have to act. So I know those are kind of wildly two examples, but I really wanted to illustrate that no matter how intense the situation is, we still have to practice radically accepting it. And I think that's why Marsha Linehan put the term radical in there, because some of the things that, we're asking our clients to accept, things that have happened to them, it's pretty radical for them to do that and for us to ask them to do that, but it allows them to get out of that suffering and find other ways to manage. Okay, so now we're moving on to emotional regulation skills. So we discussed mindfulness, distress tolerance. Now we're into emotional regulation. So these are all emotional regulation skills listed. Checking the facts, evaluate if the emotions are based in reality or irrational thought. Once again, are these emotions effective or not? Opposite action, act in the opposite way to your emotion to change how you feel. Problem solving, break down problems into steps to take action. Accumulating positives, actively seek out and engage in positive experiences to improve your mood. Coping ahead is preparing for a stressful situation by practicing coping skills in advance. The please skill is an acronym, and this skill is largely focused on people taking care of their physical needs, their lifestyle, eating healthy, avoid mood-altering substances, and sleeping well. Like we talked earlier, if you're not sleeping well, if you're using substances, that aren't moderated, or you're not getting physical activity, then it's going to be hard to regulate your emotions just to begin with. So this please skill seems obvious, but it's also one of the more important, because if you're not eating, then it's going to be hard for me as a therapist to help you improve your mood when you can't even focus fully. And then once again, we're seeing how mindfulness is kind of incorporated and dropped into so many of these skills. So we want to be mindful of our emotions, observe and describe our emotions without judgment, and better understand to regulate them. So this is a flow chart that I use all the time. And so this flow chart is going to help us use multiple skills, and it's going to help us learn what skills to use. So largely we're looking at, wise mind, mindfulness, opposite action, and problem solving. And so ask, does the emotion fit the facts? So let's go back to our fender bender. And, we're late, or our kid's in the car. Once again, nobody's hurt, but it's still frustrating. It's still scary. And there's definitely emotions there. So, does the emotion fit the fact? I would say yes. I mean, that's a terrible situation. You're going to be upset. So now we need to ask ourselves, is acting on this emotion effective? This is the key here, because we can validate one's emotions. Yes, when your mom says that, I can see that you would be upset and that you would want to yell back at her. I get that's your emotion, and it can kind of fit the situation. But when you yell at your mom, how effective is that? And so then we go to the answer of, okay, well, it's not effective. And so we would do the opposite action. So once again, the opposite action is, maybe the daughter or the son is walking away, taking some cool down time. Um, maybe they try to, speak in a calmer method. Um, so that is how we can validate someone's emotions, not place judgment on them, but still pointing out that they're not acting effectively and say, hey, let's practice the opposite action skill and see what that would look like. Say, that the emotion does fit the fact, you're in a crowded situation and there's an emergency kind of thing. So the emotion is going to be high alert, getting to safety or something. Is acting on that effective? Yes, absolutely. And so we want to get then to the problem solving, you know and once again, going back to radical acceptance. So something we do in DBT is called skill stacking. So going back to radical acceptance, if you're in a crowd and something's happening, the sooner you accept that something is happening, the quicker you can get to the problem solving skill and potentially, better the situation for yourself and the people you are with. So that problem solving is really important, but we also have to be mindful that we're accepting what's happening in order to be able to solve the problem. If we don't think there's a problem or we don't acknowledge it as a problem because we're not accepting it, then we're not going to be able to solve it. Um, so on the other hand of things, when does the emotions not fit the facts? Maybe we stub our toe and we rage out, so that emotion doesn't fit the facts. Is acting on it effectively, worthwhile? No. So once again, we're going to do the opposite action. Um, so this is a great resource tool that I use. This is from Marsha Linehan's DBT Skills handouts. Okay, so the coping ahead skill, real life example. So this is what coping ahead would look like. This is something that I use for my emotional regulation all the time, every day, quite frankly. Now, not everything I have 2 weeks to prepare for, but I'm still trying to be mindful to cope ahead. Um, I won't tell you how many weeks I prepared for this speech today. Um, but 2 weeks prior, we're saying that we're going to identify a stressful situation and anticipate potential changes. Obviously, it's fair to say that, like I said, we don't always have 2 weeks, but assume we got an interview or a doctor's appointment or something, that's going to be stressful. So 1 week prior, we're going to want to brainstorm coping skills and practice them. So put yourself in that situation. What are you going to do, when the time comes? What kind of skills are you going to use? How are they going to look like? One day before, a few days before, you're actually visualizing walking through all these steps. You're visualizing walking into the building, meeting the hiring manager, shaking their hand. What are you going to wear? What is your, body language going to look like? You're visualizing walking through the entire situation. You know, what does it look like for the doctor to give me bad news? How would I, visualize and cope through that? Day of, we're going to be implementing our skills and monitoring our emotions. Afterwards, we're going to reflect on what worked well in areas of improvement. You know, uh, Once again, we're not using judgment. So if we're not using judgment, how can we reflect to see, what was bad and what was good? Well, once again, it's not about what's bad or what's good. It's about what's effective. And so I like to think of my life as a science experiment. If I've been putting this science experiment together for 2 weeks, And then upon reflection, I think, oh, I could have used this coping skill, in a certain way. Well, it's not that I failed or that I should have. It's just next time I run this experiment, I will add that in there and we'll see how the outcome turns. And then ongoing, we need to continually be thinking of ourselves, as this experiment and building on our skills and our successes. Okay, so now we are on the last pillar in interpersonal effectiveness. Once again, these DBT skills help us communicate effectively, maintain healthy relationships, and assert our needs while respecting others and ourselves. So there is, once again, we're looking at these acronyms. In each of the words, give, fast, are its own not only acronym, but for a specific type of communication. So the give skill is for keeping the relationship a priority. So you're wanting to be gentle, you're going to want to be, interested and validating using active listening skills, and you want to be at an easy manner. Maybe you're apologizing, maybe you're approaching a sensitive subject. You would want to use the give skill. Okay, so the fast skill um, is to keep my self-respect as a priority. And so this is where, maybe we've been pushed around a little bit. Maybe we got, a bully situation, whether that's at work or, maybe we're trying to be more assertive in our families. So this is where you would use the fast skill. So this is all about keeping my self-respect as a priority because so much when we're working with people, with borderline personality, a lot of them describe themselves as empaths or empathetic. They're always, apologizing and making excuses for other people. And so this is a great skill for them to learn to maintain their own self-respect. So we want to be fair to ourselves and others, make no apologies, which is really hard for some of these folks, stick to our values. So, we're not over compromising and to be honest and truthful. Walking the middle path is really all about the dialectics and the wise mind. It's balancing both acceptance and change while relating to others and yourself. Remember, at any given time, two opposing thoughts, can be happening at the same time, or feelings or emotions. And then validation. Find the kernel of truth in your and another person's perspective. Communicate your understanding to the person or yourself. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to move forward to this slide and then go back. Interpersonal effectiveness skills. So another thing that we teach in interpersonal effectiveness skills is behavioral change strategies. I think sometimes therapists get accused for being manipulative, and I think sometimes we accuse our clients of being manipulative. The answer is probably yes for both of those situations. And I would argue that no matter what we're doing, whether we're trying to influence someone's behavior or not, just by interacting with them, we're influencing their behavior. So I'm arguing that these skills just give us a little bit more power and influence to do what we're already doing anyways, which is making impressions on other people. So these are some of those skills that we teach, the reinforcement, and then there's the negative reinforcement. And we're not so much talking about like negative as like, bad, but we're removing something like a punishment or negative feedback. So it's actually, if we would have maybe yelled at someone, we're actually removing that yelling and reinforcing them like, hey, I noticed you tried, let's next time let's try it this way. So we're actually, it's confusing because it says negative reinforcement, but it's about removing that negative. And then of course there are other shaping behaviors and punishments and extinctions. Okay, well, we got about 15 minutes left. This is my last slide, and this is the one that I wanted to go in depth on. I'll take Carl's help with this. I'll explain it, and then if anybody in the audience has something that they're trying to communicate to someone else, we can do a Dear Man script for you. So maybe put your issue in the chat and I'll try to put it together in a Dear Man script. So Dear Man, once again, is an acronym. The Dear part is for getting our wants and needs or making a request. So we're describing a situation, expressing how it makes me feel, asserting what I want, and reinforce any consequences. The man part is about staying in our skills and with wise mind. We want to be mindful, appear confident, and negotiate only if necessary. So I have an example, but if anybody wants to, maybe they're working on making a request to someone or they're trying to get their needs met, and they've had a hard time doing that, I'd be glad to um, use this skill with a real life example.
And just as a reminder, put that in the chat if you have one.
Also, I'll try to leave some time to answer a few questions, but want to be respectful of your all's time and wrap up at 1.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat at the moment, Matt.
Okay, no worries. So
Oh,
I'm
hold
gonna
on.
go.
We did. Lee Basinger said, roommate is refusing to help with any household chores. This is building resentment because I have to handle everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And believe it or not, my example was about a partner not doing housework. So I think we can all relate, or many of us can, and what a great example. So we need to describe the situation. So the situation clearly is that the roommate is not doing, the housework. But also, I would maybe add into why that's important. So, the situation is the house needs to be picked up as a part of a healthy living style. I don't want the dishes, I don't want bugs, and to prevent these things, we need to keep ourselves picked up, the place picked up. Maybe the situation's in the bathroom, you share bathroom, and it's like, well, I need your stuff put away so I can, have my stuff. So the situation, you're not only describing the situation as to what the person's doing, but kind of why, you think it's important. And then you can add express, how it makes me feel. So I always stress that it's important to use I statements. So I feel, I think. So I feel that our house needs to be kept up better. I feel that I do most of the work, and that is leading me to, second guess our relationship or have, some more frustrations with our relationship. Um, and then you assert clearly what you want. So this is where you would cope ahead because you got to think about what it is that you actually want. And check the facts, another skill, right? Is it realistic for my roommate to actually be able to do this? Are they capable of these things? Um, I want my mom to love me, but maybe she's not capable of that, right? So when we're asserting what we want, we have to think of these other factors. It's not only about what we want, but you know, is this something that they could also provide? So, I want that we, keep our house picked up and what does that look like? Well, at the end of the day, I don't want any, dishes on the counter, so that's what you want. I would also say that maybe break it up into smaller goals. Like I want the house perfectly clean to start with. Well, how about we keep the dishes, off? And then reinforce the consequences. Like you already stated when you expressed how you felt, is is it's causing resentment in our relationship, in this day and age. We need roommates, generally speaking. I enjoy being with you. We have a lot of good times. But I'm really struggling with the way the house is being kept up. I'm feeling like I'm doing a lot of it, and I think that consequence is that it's going to continue to impact our relationship. And I don't want that, but that would be a consequence. So once again, appear mindful. Um, so you're being mindful of your own emotions. If they're getting heated, are you getting heated? If they're getting passive aggressive, are you getting passive aggressive? So be mindful of that. Appear confident. You're making a request, you're asserting what you want, and you're putting in a consequence. So you not only have to be confident about that, but you need to follow through with it. And then the negotiation, if necessary, would be like, okay, um, Mondays and Fridays, I'll do the kitchen. Tuesdays and Thursdays, you do the kitchen. And on Wednesdays, we try to just pick up the whole house together or whatever, right? So you negotiate. And I would also think about that negotiation and have it in your back pocket, just like your thinking about what you're asserting. Know that if it comes to a negotiation, that you have a plan, because once again, you're wanting to appear confident and, stay on top of the conversation. Now, I will say that no matter how perfect your Dear Man script is, and no matter how cool, calm, and collective you stay, that doesn't mean that our perfect execution of this skill is going to make the other person automatically say, "Oh, well, yes, I love doing dishes. It slipped my mind," So don't beat yourself up if you do this and it doesn't seem to hit the way you want. I have had, this is actually the experience my clients have had more not often than not. But what we've noticed is it's certainly planting a seed, and their behaviors over time improved over the following weeks after that conversation. Okay, well, we got a few more minutes for some questions, and then we'll wrap up. Once again, thank you all for joining me.
I went ahead and dropped in the chat the link and password if you want a certificate of attendance for this um, webinar. It is in there for you. Matt, I know that a couple times people ask for an email address for the PowerPoint. I don't know how you want to get that to people, but
Yes. Let's see. Let me put it in the chat here. I think I can do that. Let's see. Well, and put this email in here, but also this will be recorded and you can go back to the Metro Council Best DBT training I've had. Yay, thank you.
All right, let me pop that in again for people.
Okay, sending this to everybody. Matt B at beaconmh.org. Thank you all. I appreciate your positive
Uh,
support and feedback.
and my apologies, my thing defaulted to just emailing myself and Matt. So you should see the link now and there for the password and the link for the certificate of attendance. Also just dropped in the link for registration for the mental health KC conference. So
Uh, yes, Beacon has a DBT group that works with teenagers. Um, Beacon has open enrollment, so you can just walk in if you're not a part of the Beacon system, and they'll do an intake. The intake takes about 2 hours, and then you could ask about the DBT teen therapist. Yes, Beacon does take Medicaid. Thank you all. So glad that we were able to get some good information out there.
it
Thank
was
you
good.
all so
And I'll
much.
throw out there too, Matt, that it's been probably close to 10 years since I've been on the clinical side. And there was a lot of stuff that I learned that I will be putting into practice, most especially the slide about, looking at something 2 weeks out and things. I'm 2 weeks out from a
Yes,
big event and I'm going to be
right.
putting that into practice today. So thank
I
you.
know that's right. Yeah, you got a big old event. Someone said the password wasn't working. Thank you, Ethan.
All right. Well, if it's
Oh,
not
some people
working,
are getting it to work. It says worked for me.
yeah, let me look one more time.
Well, I'm going to have to get going, but thank you all again so much. Thank you, Carl. You're a great host, and you all have a great rest of your week and enjoy the beautiful weather. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as make sure it's Burton, capital Burton, no space, number 4, then a period, and then 10. Um, if you can't get that to work, you can email, let me drop my email address in here. Oops, it should be com, not con. And it should be a Z, so let me try that again. Can't type. There we go. canderson@dcmhs.com. Email me if you can't get the password to work, and I will make sure somebody gets on that with you. So, Matt has had to drop off. I want to thank everybody again for attending. We really appreciate it. Check out Mental Health KC conference online. Register if you want to come to that event. Also, honestly, if you're interested in volunteering at the event, use my email address, and I will talk to you about that as well. Otherwise, I'm stopping the recording now, and I thank you all for being here.